Hi guys, we're going to read some more of Miss Daisy is Crazy, starting with chapter 5 today. When we paused last time, Miss Daisy could not spell the word read, and the students are convinced that she's an imposter. But AJ thinks, hey, they should keep her because maybe they won't have to learn anything if she can't teach them anything. So let's find out. Chapter 5, the most genius idea. After lunch, we had recess, which means we get to go out in the playground and run around. Miss Daisy said we needed to burn off energy. Now, this is more my style, I announced when we got outside. I made a beeline for the monkey bars. Then me and some other kids hit the swings. After that, all the boys had a contest to see who could spin around in circles the longest without throwing up. Michael Robinson won. Then we all sat down on the grass. Even though Miss Daisy was pretty cool, we all agreed that we hated school. We made a promise to one another that we would hate school forever, even if we changed our minds and decided that we liked school. That's when Ryan came up with the most genius idea in the history of the world. This was his idea. We should buy the school. Ryan told us that his father worked for this big company, and that once his father's company bought some other company, just like you would go into a store and buy a candy bar. Ryan said it happens all the time. He said he didn't see any reason why we couldn't buy the school, just like that. If we bought the school, what would we do with it? Michael Robinson asked. We could do anything we want with it. We'd own it. Could we turn it into a video game arcade? I asked. Sure, why not? Instead of teaching reading and writing and arithmetic, we could teach kids how to play video games. And we could ride skateboards in the hallways, asked Michael Robinson. Sure we could, Ryan said, if we owned it. I got all excited because if there's one thing that I like to do almost as much as playing football, it's playing video games. Oh, and riding skateboards. I started emptying out my pockets. I had a nickel, 3 pennies, and a lifesaver. The other boys emptied their pockets too. We separated all the pennies, the nickels, and the dimes into little piles. Then we added up all the money. We had $1.32. Do you think they've got a lot of money, guys? Wow, Michael Robinson said. That's a lot of money. I don't think it's enough to buy a school, said Ryan, who knew a thing or two about financial matters because his father worked for this big company. Well, how much do you need to buy a school? I asked. Beats me, said Ryan. We'd better ask Miss Daisy. We all rushed inside after recess and asked Miss Daisy how much it would cost to buy the school. Gee, I don't know, said Miss Daisy, who didn't seem to know much of anything. Why do you want to buy the school? We want to turn it into a video game arcade, I told her. What a great idea, she beamed. I love video games. There are so many schools and so few video game arcades. It makes perfect sense to turn some of those schools into video game arcades. I'll arrange a meeting with Mr. Klutz tomorrow so we can ask him if we can buy the school. But right now, we have to go to Mrs. Cooney's office. Mrs. Cooney's office is down the hall from our class. She says she's the school nurse, but personally, I think she's a spy. I'll tell you why. There's this big poster on her wall that says this. And if you look at the poster, it's got EYWXLEO, just a bunch of random letters. I tried to read it, and it didn't make any sense at all. Even Andrea Young didn't know how to read the poster, and she knows everything. I think Mrs. Cooney has created a secret code, and she's using the poster to send mystery spy messages. I will have to keep an eye on her. When we walked into Mrs. Cooney's office, she had us all line up in size order. I was one of the shortest kids, so I had to stand in front of the line. Then Mrs. Cooney told us to take off our shoes. At first, I thought she didn't want us to track mud all over her office, but then she told us she was going to weigh and measure us. Obviously, she is trying to gather information about us because that is what spies do. My friend Billy says that the heavier you are, the smarter you are, because heavy people have bigger brains. But I think Billy just says that because he is overweight. I weighed 52 pounds. Mrs. Cooney showed us this awesome ruler she has. It is made of metal and stretches out 6 feet long. When she presses a button, the whole thing shoots into her hand and disappears like magic. That is cool. I'll bet she has lots of other spy tools, too. She wouldn't let us play with her magic ruler, but Mrs. Cooney ran around measuring everything. She showed us that the bench we were sitting on was 17 inches high. The door to her office was 30 inches across, and her foot was 12 inches long. Hey, my foot is a foot, Mrs. Cooney exclaimed. Aren't all feet feet? I asked. Some feet are less than a foot, and some feet are more than a foot, she replied, but my foot is exactly a foot. I had no idea what she was talking about. Mrs. Cooney wrapped the measuring tape around her forehead and announced, "Look, my head is almost 2 feet in circumference." I knew that circumference was the distance all the way around a circle, and diameter was the distance through the middle of the circle. "What's the diameter of your head, Mrs. Cooney?" I asked. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. "That would be hard to measure, but isn't measuring things fun?" Mrs. Cooney asked. "I wonder how much the scale weighs." Mrs. Cooney started to measure and weigh more things, but Miss Daisy said we had to go back to class. So they had an interesting trip to the nurse's office, but they really think she's a spy. Does anybody really think that this poster is a secret message? Or is that just where you go to get your eyes checked? If you've ever had your eyes checked before and you have to read those letters, you know that it's not really secret messages. All right, chapter 6. What do you want to be? At the end of the day, Miss Daisy sat on the floor and we all sat around her. She told us to talk about what we want to be when we grow up. "I want to be a veterinarian," said Andrea Young. "Does anybody know what the word veterinarian means?" asked Miss Daisy. "That's somebody who doesn't eat meat," said Michael Robinson. "It is not," I said. "That's a vegetarian. A veterinarian is somebody who fought in a war." "That's a veteran," Miss Daisy said. "Andrea, would you like to tell the class what a veterinarian does?" "A veterinarian is an animal doctor." That Andrea Young, she thinks that she knows everything, but for once, I knew she was wrong. "Animals can't be doctors," I said. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Miss Daisy said a veterinarian is a doctor who takes care of animals. That made a lot more sense than that dumb thing Andrea said. Emily was next, and she said she wanted to grow up and become a nurse in the hospital. "Why do you want to do that?" I asked. "People come into hospitals all sick and injured, their arms falling off, their guts hanging out." "AJ," Miss Daisy said in her serious voice. Emily got all upset and ran out of the room crying. "What did I say?" I asked. "What do you want to be when you grow up, AJ?" Miss Daisy asked. "I'm going to be a famous football player," I said. "Really? And why did you choose that field?" "Because I love football," I said. "And if I was a football player, I wouldn't have to read or write or do arithmetic or go to school. My friend Billy told me that football players are really dumb." "Your friend told you that?" said Miss Daisy. "Yeah, Billy is really smart. He also told me that if you dig a hole deep enough, you can dig all the way to China. And if you fall into that hole, you'd fall all the way through the earth and pop right out the other side. And you'd be moving so fast that you'd shoot all the way into outer space." Do you think that AJ's getting some good advice from his friend Billy? Doesn't think so. Do we think that football players are dumb? Because they go to school too. AJ's advice he's getting from Billy may not be the best. Michael Robinson said that sounded cool, though. He decided that instead of becoming a firefighter, he wanted to become one of those hole-digging astronauts. Emily came back into the room with a tissue. Everybody else went around in a circle saying what they wanted to be. This girl named Lindsay said she wanted to be a singer. Ryan said he wanted to be a businessman like his dad. Andrea Young said that if she couldn't be a veterinarian, she wanted to be a teacher like Miss Daisy. Then she gave Miss Daisy a big smile. I hate her. Do you think AJ really hates his friend Andrea? Maybe he just is a little jealous sometimes. Chapter 7, Bonbons and Footballs. The next day, Miss Daisy brought in a box with ribbons on it and told us she had a surprise. What's in the box? We pleaded. It's a secret. Please. Well, okay, she said, opening the box. It's bonbons. Miss Daisy said she thought we might be able to use them for arithmetic problems so we could learn together. She put the bonbons on the table in the front of the room. There must have been 20 or 30 of them. Can somebody think up an arithmetic problem using bonbons? She asked. Andrea? If you had 3 bonbons in a box, said Andrea as she put 3 bonbons into her pencil box, and you had 3 boxes just like that, how many bonbons would you have altogether? Miss Daisy looked at Andrea's pencil box for a long time, counting in her head and on her fingers. Any dummy would know that 3 boxes with 3 bonbons in each box would equal 9 bonbons. 3 times 3 is 9. But Miss Daisy didn't seem to know that. Finally, she just opened up Andrea's pencil box and popped the 3 bonbons into her mouth. Who cares about how many bonbons I would have, she asked, as long as I get to eat some of them. Miss Daisy really needs a lot of help with arithmetic. After she had eaten her bonbons, Miss Daisy passed out bonbons for all of us, and we had a bonbon party. Then she said that was enough arithmetic for the day and asked what we wanted to talk about for the rest of our math time. Football, I shouted. Miss Daisy didn't like that I had talked without raising my hand first. Personally, I don't see what raising my hand has to do with talking. I don't talk with my hands. But she did let me talk, and I told her that football is just about my favoriteest thing in the whole world, and I know all about it. My dad takes me to every game of the Chargers, a professional football team. Maybe you can help me, Miss Daisy said. I always wondered how long is a football field? 100 yards, I told her. Anybody knows that. Wow, that's a big field. With a field that big, how can you and your father see what's going on? My dad always tries to get us seats near the 50-yard line, I said. They're the best tickets. Why? Miss Daisy asked. Because the 50-yard line is right in the middle of the field. Does that mean half of 100 yards would be 50 yards? She asked. Yup. I see, Miss Daisy said. So if you know there are 100 yards on a football field, do you know how many pennies there are in $1? Andrea? 100, hollered Andrea Young, just like a football field. Really, said Miss Daisy. So if half the football field is 50 yards, how many pennies are in half $1? 50, Michael Robinson shouted, because 50 is half of 100. And 50 plus 50 makes 100. And half of 50 must be 25 because 2 quarters is 50 cents, added Emily. And 4 quarters makes $1, Ryan exclaimed. And 4 quarters makes a football game too, Miss Daisy shouted, jumping up and down with excitement. Wait a minute, I said. I thought you told us we were finished with arithmetic. This wasn't arithmetic, she told us. It was football. Well, okay, I said, just as long as you weren't trying to sneak arithmetic into our conversation about football. Would I do that? Miss Daisy asked, and then she winked at me. Sometimes it's hard to tell if Miss Daisy is serious or not. All right, guys, we're going to pause there. It looks to me like maybe Miss Daisy might have sneaked some math into their conversation. All right, and tomorrow we'll start on chapter 8, a lot of books. Bye, guys.